guys, this is Nurse Jay, Nursing the Truth. I hope everyone's having a great day. This is going to be part two to my Atlantis series, The Downfall of the Lost City of Atlantis. So I described about the destruction and what happened and why. And now I'm going to be talking about sailing away and leaving and some of the players of the Atlanteans and where they located. Now, as you know, I am totally in love with Kemet, and so I am going to be making relationships between the lost city of Atlantis and Egypt. So I'm not going to read the other countries or whatever. I'm just going to focus more on Kemet slash Egypt. Now, they say that many well-educated, devout Atlanteans moved to both southern and northern Egypt in the years before the final destruction of their homeland. So it seems like you had some people that already left, and then God says when the destruction actually happened, he went there. Okay? So that's pretty cool. Although conflicts frequently arose between church and state in Egypt, and migrating tribes from the east constantly threatened, Edgar Casey recalls that the country became a spiritual, scientific, and cultural center, and that the Atlanteans even found time to conduct archaeological research concerning the past occupants of the land. Casey also refers to the Atlanteans' establishment of worship of the sun god in Egypt, a practice that survived for many thousands of years. Yes, Atum or Amun, was the oldest god worshipped in Egypt, the oldest sun god worshipped in Egypt. In their Egyptian temple Beautiful, and in the temple of sacrifice, Atlantean descendants continued their ancient practices. They utilized music and dance and initiation and raised their souls to higher levels. Capable priests and priestesses in the temple Beautiful assisted uncertain individuals in deciding on their lifetime occupations based on their individual's karmic development. Isn't this wonderful? Because the Temple of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor, I've been to both of those, people would come from all over. That was the learning center. That was where you got grounded and life, and where you were going to learn your trade. And people worked at the temple to keep it up. And I don't know. I would love to go to the Karnak Temple now and learn. That would be the most fascinating thing. Everyone who sought this advice was given a life seal, which was a plaque to contemplate when they needed additional encouragement and insight. When the weather changed and it ceased to rain in southern Egypt, the permanent drought forced Atlantean descendants to abandon their homes and move. They joined the Berbers in the Atlas Mountains or journeyed north and east along the banks of the Nile to live with other groups from Atlantis, where water was not a problem. Okay, so now we see the Berbers was another Atlantean descendant. Check the Berbers out, people. Archaeologists have recently unearthed numerous settlements of Cro-Magnon farmers who lived 13,000 BCE along the Nile, 28 miles down the river from the Aswan Dam. Okay. Before the Cro-Magnon man was the Neanderthal. And when God Thoth went to Kemet, he said that these barbarian black-headed people with clubs wanted to hit him and, was acting very barbaric. This answers it all. Answers it all, people. From 13,000 BCE until 11,500 BCE, the successful people enjoyed a golden age of agriculture, utilizing sickle blades and grinding stones to produce a diet based on grains. Prior to the destruction of their country, wise men and women in Atlantis foresaw the long forthcoming period of devastation and a longer epoch of intellectual darkness. They chose Egypt as a place to preserve some of the vast historical and technological knowledge accumulated in the temple of Poseidon. Poseidon? Enki. And did you know Enki was Ptah in Egypt? Working with scholars, priests, architects, and engineers, their builders constructed pyramids, temples, and a hall of records in an area of strong earth energy. Yes, truth seekers, who do you think is over the hall of records? You got it. God Thoth, the scribe. Before the final destruction of their country, the Atlanteans placed their most valuable documents in their safer places. Atlanteans and their descendants in Egypt lived well. Attempting to retain the high standards of their lost country, they transmitted information from generation to generation for hundreds of years. Eventually, natural catastrophes in nearby lands forced aggressive and civilized tribes into Egypt from all sides. Yes, they were attacked north, south, east, and west. The ruinous barbarians almost totally destroyed the advanced Atlantean civilization. In spite of the invaders, priests continuously struggled to guard the valuable lore and to convey it to initiates in secret ceremonies. Learned descendants of Atlanteans who traveled the seas after their country disappeared and eventually sailed up the Nile River supplemented the teachings with additional wisdom. As a result, occult practices, levitation, architectural and construction skills, and historical information such as the communication in regard to Atlantis that Solon received at Sais were preserved in Egypt. With wisdom from its past and perhaps with input from the visitors from the 10th planet. Okay. Visitors from the 10th planet. And what is the 10th planet? Nibiru. Who assisted the Sumerians. The mature Egyptian civilization of our history books appeared very suddenly. It was advanced when it began. In the early years of the first dynasty, the first period of Egyptian recorded history, about 31 BC to 284 BCE, the people had a complex written language with signs that represented sounds. Their goldsmith displayed a high degree of proficiency that indicated a long period of development. It just stepped on the scene. It's like, boom, there you are. No instructions, no schooling. There it is. The people that left went to Kemet and was already on the ball. Now, they had to teach their children that they had, of course, but it was already going. No stopping, no breaking. How can the most powerful civilization that we know of have records, just like the Sumerians, that were advanced? Enlightenment from Atlantis, preserved and passed down by the priesthood in Egypt, and I thank you so much for that, contributed to the unusual accomplishments of the people of the first dynasty. Their calendar demonstrates this very well, as was often the case in prehistory. It was based on hours, with dissimilar amounts of hours of daylight and darkness, depending on the locality. The longest day of the Egyptian calendar attained 12 hours and 55 minutes, the shortest, 11 hours and 5 minutes. These periods of time do not correspond to the location of Egypt, where the days would be longer in summer and shorter in winter, but they do correspond to Atlantis, 80 miles to the south. God Thoth is the God and the maker of the calendar. Give thanks to God Thoth. He is the man. And Nurse J has now found her answer. How far was Atlantis from Kim? 80 miles to the south. When sacred buildings disintegrated in North Egypt, new structures were erected over the old. Robert Bouval, a Belgian construction engineer and astronomer, studied the arrangement of the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid of Cheops, and its nearby pyramids and temples, taking into account the correlation of the buildings to the constellations and the stars in the skies, that the site of the Great Pyramid was first laid out in 10,450 BCE. Edgar Casey says that these buildings stand on the hollowed ground above the pyramid containing the Hall of Records and its valuable information. Yes, it is there. It is there. And that's why it is magical. Your life will forever change if you could step on that holy ground. The Great Pyramid, advanced architectural and engineering skills developed by Atlanteans and saved in Egypt, together with advice from extraterrestrials, were instrumental in the construction of the exceptional Great Pyramid. Yes, God Thoth says in his Emerald Tablets that he was the builder of the Great Pyramid. And the gods from heaven were involved in their construction. To complete the Great Pyramid, the builders used more than 2,500,000 granite and limestone blocks, some weighing 70 tons, which were excavated from quarries many miles away. The structure occupies 13 acres, or the equivalent of 7 square blocks of Manhattan. Their saws, even with the jeweled teeth of 9-foot blades, required 2 tons of pressure to cut through the hard granite. Herodotus and others who studied the casing stones report that they were covered with writing. Ancient papyri allege this writing contained the mysteries of science, astronomy, geometry, physics, and more. And God Thoth is the God of all of that. After a series of earthquakes in the 13th century, Arabs removed the invaluable stones and used them to construct mosques and palaces in Cairo. In ancient drawings, the Sphinx, which is adjacent to the Great Pyramid, is pictured crouching atop a stone building. Once, the immense stone statue was almost completely covered by sand, so it is possible another building lays buried in the deep sand beneath it. Edgar Casey says there is a chamber or passage from the right forepaw to the entrance of the record chamber or record tomb. Japanese scientists who recently spent months measuring and scanning the Sphinx building discovered underground cavities near the Sphinx and a possible tunnel near the right paw. The Egyptian government is unwilling to permit drilling under the monuments, fearing they might collapse. Casey advises that when man has evolved to a higher understanding and is ready for it, this concealed knowledge of Atlantis will be revealed. And God Thoth says the same thing. Same thing. Are we there? Are we getting there yet? A form of energy operates within the pyramids. But even though this phenomenon is the subject of numerous experiments, no one really understands how it works. The energy was discovered when it became apparent that ancient garbage and death animals in the Great Pyramid were not rotted, did not smell, and appeared to be mummified. Psychic Paul Solomon reports that the power of pyramid energy has preserved food in the Hall of Records beneath the Sphinx in the Great Pyramid, and that is still edible. Researchers propose that in addition to preserving food, given the proper conditions, the energy of pyramids is capable of sharpening razor blades, improving the taste of tap water, stimulating plant growth and seed germination, recharging batteries, facilitating the healing process, and increasing vitality and fertility. Man, I wish I could have went into the pyramid. I really wanted to. No telling what more it could have done to me. The Keeper of Time has locked the doors to many rooms of the past, but fragments of information relating to Atlantis has slipped out. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, written on papyri found in tombs and on mummy wrappings dating to thousands of years, describes the abode of the souls that lay to the west beyond the Pillar of Hercules, where Atlantis lie. Here, canals connected green, fertile islands where the wheat and barley grow to the heights. The Book of the Dead refers to the god Thoth, the guardian of the two lands, who brought culture to Egypt from a western land. Egyptian priest historian Manetho mentions an Egyptian calendar that began in 11,542 BCE. Herodotus describes papyrus rolls in Egypt with the names of 330 kings. The list dates back to 11,000 years before this time. The Papyrus of Turin is one of the two surviving records of ancient Egyptian kings. It documents the names of 10 gods who reigned during the first time. Do you not understand? Listen to me carefully. These gods, whoever they are, were there before men ruled. And did you know that the gods walked with men? It documents the names of 10 gods who reigned during the first time, as well as the mortal kings of Upper and Lower Egypt who ruled after the gods. But before the first pharaoh of the first dynasty in 31 BCE, ancient Egyptians described the first time as the period when the gods ruled their country and brought it out of darkness. These gods, whom they call the Neteru, were both males and females, and the Neteru were stronger and more intelligent than humans and possessed supernatural powers. But they were susceptible to sickness and death. Their connection to Atlantis is apparent in that the early Egyptians believed that gods could transport people across the water to the abode of souls. Diodorus, a historian, also studied ancient scrolls on one of his trips to Egypt, which referred to a succession of gods, heroes, and mortal kings who reigned for thousands of years. It is very possible that these gods and the Neteru were visitors from other spaces whose contributions to the early advanced civilization in Egypt were ever evident long after they departed. You know, the historians Manetho, Herodotus, Diodorus, they wrote what they saw. How awesome. Just think about this for a minute. I know people call myth fake stories. What do we have to go by? What really do we have to go on? Do you believe the legends? Why are they called legends and myths? Mythology. How would we really know the stories if all of these stories are myth and we know that the Bible is conjured up with all of the different countries' myth? Then the Bible can't be real, right? You see, they put the word mythology on there to confuse you. The very beginning of the beginnings of time are stored in Egypt and in Samaria. And the rest of the stories are grabbed and accumulated and written and changed. But the gods are the same gods no matter what pantheon you're in. They have the same attributes. If you look in the scriptures in Psalms, the Most High gets on to the gods. And he says, you will die like mortal men. Where are the gods now? Why did they leave? Is it just to see how far we have progressed in the game? Is it like the movies where the gods sit back and they watch and they say, we're not going to interfere with man's lives anymore? Are we one with the gods? And we are the gods now, roaming with men. All I know is every time and everything I look at, it has Thoth's fingerprints on it. Calendar, time, universe, thoughts, the books, the writings, the records, the sciences, the mathematics, the geometries, the buildings, the architecture. And he tells us that we are the children of the light. And always follow the light and the truth. That with our eye be full of light, then your whole body will be full of light. Well, dear truth seekers, I hope this has been a wonderful video for you. I hope that the people that love Egypt as much as I do, I hope I've brought more to you today. The love of Egypt fills my heart and my soul, and one day I hope to return to my beloved land that I so miss. Until then, Hotep and Ashe and all my brothers and sisters, we shall see each other another time.